In this video, we're going over some tips to help you get the most out of your AI image generation within Canva. So these tips are going to work with that new Dream Lab, but also work within that project interface where you also have that older version of that text to image generator. As a reminder, this video is part of a tutorial series on the latest AI tools in Canva. So if you want to check out some of those other videos and learn all about the different AI tools in Canva, just check the description below this video and you'll find links to all the different videos that are part of this series. As a second reminder, I do have a couple of free giveaways that are complements to this learning series. So I have my Canva AI tool guide, which is just a quick visual reference to really go over each tool, where to find it, how to use it, tips for using the tool. So just an easy reference you can have handy whenever you're working with these tools. And then the second free giveaway is my visual style guide, which is really going to help you start to learn the language you can use when prompting and creating AI images to really get a variety of great results. So it's going to give you over 100 keywords, descriptions to go along with those, and it's going to really help you start to build that sort of visual language and that library of terms you need to get great results. So I'm going to put a link in the first pinned comment below and also in the description below this video. Sign up for my email and you can get those free guides. Okay, now that in the last couple lessons we learned about using both this Dreamlab tool and the AI image generation tool from within the project interface, let's talk about how you can use these AI image generation tools and get the most out of them. So there's some creative things you can do. I'm going to give you some tips for really getting a lot of creative results, but then we're also going to talk about some practical considerations, because you do want to focus in on what's going to bring the most benefit to you, your brand, your business. So I've started some examples here on this page, so we're just going to scroll through them and we're going to talk about them. And I'm going to give you some tips for getting the most out of this AI image generation ability within Canva. Okay, let's start by looking at this example here. For this generation, I just used a very basic prompt, just typed in a dog. So this is about as basic as you can get with your prompting, and it's returned 4 results here. And these all look like it's returned something that's probably a golden retriever puppy. So that's fine, but there's a lot left up to interpretation when you type in a basic prompt. I typed in a dog, it's given us a young dog. You might even say a puppy here. It's an outside scene. So I have not really taken control over the results that this is going to give back to me, because I left a very open-ended prompt with lots open to interpretation. So my initial tip for you would be descriptive, be specific, because the more descriptive and the more specific you can be, the more likely you're going to get a result that fits your needs. In other words, it's fun to just come in here and play around, and sometimes you might be doing that. You might want to leave some things open to interpretation just to see what kind of results you get. But other times you're very specifically going to know what you want, and you're not going to get that, probably not, if you don't ask for it. So ask for what you want. Learn to use that descriptive language that's going to improve your results. So if I just scroll up on here, in this one here, I've asked for a German short hair pointer puppy. And so now we see that I am getting a different dog here, German short hair puppy. This looks like a German short hair. So again, ask for what you want, okay? You have to be specific. You have to give those details. And of course, those details can cover a lot of things. You know, what are you looking for? What's the mood? What's the setting? So I would say start for how are you going to use this asset? A very good question to start with is just, you know, what are the needs of my brand, my business, whatever you're using this tool for? Start there. Think about those end assets you need, and then use all of that to get very specific with your prompting in terms of what you're asking for. So in this example here, I've started to get more specific about my subject. Instead of just a dog, I'm saying a German short hair puppy. So I'm starting to be more descriptive, but of course I can be even more descriptive about my subject. And you know, what about the setting? What about the mood? What about the colors? What about the art style? So there's really so many different things in terms of the visual language you use to describe what you want to return, that's really going to be important for you to sort of think about this, master these terms, get so you can better ask for what you are looking for, what's going to give you that final result that might be useful to you, your brand, your business. So if I scroll up the screen here, then suddenly now getting even more specific, a rain-soaked German short-hair pointer jumping over a fallen tree on a dreary moonlit night, ominous mood shot from a low camera perspective, fantasy art style. Now, I don't know that it really nailed the fantasy art style, so some of this is hit or miss, and you have to learn the different terms that might give you good results, that might not. Sometimes you have to run multiple generations to get images you like, but the more specific you can get, suddenly the more varied results, the more creative results you get. So it's going to be important to practice this. It's going to be important to build up that visual language. Think about those different ways you ask for things, and that's going to allow you to get more and more results back from this sort of tool, and also specifically hone in on the types of results that are going to work for you, your brand, your business. So scrolling up here, you can get even more descriptive. So now I'm adding even more: an epic grand scale scene, rain-soaked German-Shepherd pointer. Now I'm mentioning a forest, and so I'm also mentioning streaks of pale moonlight, fantasy art style illustration, low camera perspective. So all these different terminologies. Now, sometimes you're going to use descriptors that you find don't work. So you're going to have to experiment with what descriptors you ask for, which ones are actually affecting your results. And so you're going to have this back and forth play with this tool where you experiment around. It's not always going to instantly give you the type of thing you're looking for. But the more you play around, the more you practice with this, the more you learn this different language, the more you're going to start to, figure out what works and doesn't work for you. Now, as I mentioned before, you want to come at this from a practical standpoint. You can get really creative, and we'll talk about some of the creative ways you can use this. I'm going to give you some great art styles and terms you can use, and you want to build up that language. So just building up that library of terms, keeping track of these images here, being able to review and see what worked, what gave interesting results. That's all great, but then also remember to return to that practical standpoint of what are you looking for. So very simply, sometimes you might just tell it what you're looking for. I'm looking for an image worthy of an ad campaign for a high energy dog food brand. That's what I've typed in here, and I'm getting images that, yes, these images here would work really well for a high energy dog food brand campaign. Now, of course, this one here, which I accidentally just opened in a design, but we can see this one here actually put this little logo on here. So that's the other thing too about prompting like this. Sometimes your prompts are going to lead to things you don't want. So right here, I'm asking for an image worthy of a campaign for a high energy dog food brand, but because of that, it's actually coming in here and it's sometimes putting a product image in here. And most likely, if you were doing this sort of thing, you would already have your logo, you'd already have your product shot that maybe you were going to combine with the result you got, so you wouldn't necessarily want it to show up here in the image itself. So you might not include some of that language in your prompt if you find that that kind of language is resulting in it sticking a logo or a brand or copy on your actual returned image. So maybe instead you might try something like a high energy dog, lots of negative space, warm inviting colors, but then when I do this, it's really giving me this inside setting. Well, that's not what I intended. I want an outside shot, so be more specific. Outside image of a high energy dog, lots of negative space, warm inviting colors. Now suddenly here I'm getting a bunch of results that look like, yes, they would work pretty well. I could see putting some copy over here. So sometimes it's just about this back and forth where you sort of hone in with each generation more and more on the type of results that are going to work for that end use you're hoping for. Okay, so you're thinking about what you need as a brand and business, that end use for whatever image you're bringing back, and then you use that sort of to drive the types of prompts you're going to use in here for getting the results you want. Now, I do think that practical approach makes sense, but there's certainly plenty of times when you might want to be creative, or you might just do it for fun, playing around, or you might be trying to figure out other styles and other types of images that could work for your business. And so there's nothing wrong with coming in here and playing around. So in these prompts here, I've gone into way more detail describing a fantasy scene. And actually this language here, I used a different tool outside of Canva to help me brainstorm that language. So you can start to use other tools to help you brainstorm, to help you come up with these visual styles, this language. And so that's something I did here. And then going through here, here's one where I start to use whimsical art style, and then up here, pop art style. Now, the reason why I'm pointing out this little sort of different sets that I ran here is because this is a fantasy art style here, sort of right here. I don't think it's perfect, but we can see those elements in the background. Now, when I came up to this next prompt and I asked for this whimsical art style, it's not really bringing back to me what I would call a whimsical art style. Same thing if I go up here and I'm asking for a pop art style, it's not really bringing that back. Now, this tool is capable of that, but the reason why I'm showing you this example is because if you continually run the same sort of prompt here and you're not making a lot of changes, I've noticed that sometimes this tool, either within Canva in the interface where you're running from the Elements tab and that interface there, or here when you're in Dreamlab, I've noticed in both instances sometimes it can sort of get stuck and sticking with the style you're working on if you continually type a prompt that has a lot of the same language. And so sometimes I find that you need to reset by exiting out of the tool, coming back to the page, re-entering the prompt using some different language, and then suddenly you'll see when I did that here, I had a couple instances where it wasn't picking up this pop art style. I reset the page, I came back, I simplified, I just said a vibrant pop art style scene of a heroic dog on a cliff overlooking a fantasy kingdom, and now suddenly we see that we are definitely getting that different visual style. You can see this is much more illustrative, it's got that vibrant pop art feel, and so these images here I was able to generate, but to do it I had to get out of that stuck mode because it was just bringing back that fantasy art style, which I'd asked for numerous times. I needed to reset the tool. So I have noticed that little glitch where sometimes you have to exit out for a second and come back if you find you're using language in there and it's just missing. Now, there are some things you might ask for that it's just not capable of, but it really can do an awful lot in terms of these different visual styles you can ask for. So you can ask for different art styles. You can even do things like a dog made out of macaroni. So you can tell it to say, make this object out of something else, and then suddenly you get all these results. Now, this looks more like rotini and not actually macaroni, but it is a dog made out of pasta. So just showing you that you have all these creative outlets when you use this sort of tool. Now, the other sort of thing to keep in mind is, I mentioned before, that practical approach of what is your end use, because you might be something where you're working on a campaign and you know you need a picture of a golden retriever, but maybe you're going to stick a golden retriever in another scene instead of creating all as one image. So if you're going to do that where you want to be able to cut an object out, you might ask for something very basic and make sure there's going to be contrast between your subject and the background. That way you know you can use something like the background remover and easily remove your subject later. So here I just asked for a golden retriever on a contrasting minimal background because I know with this sort of result here, I can use that background remover tool and very easily cut out the image of this golden retriever, and then I can generate a background separately. I can just have a plain color, so I can do lots of different things with this image because I want this image asset, and then I can build the scene myself, add in the copy, the other things that might be part of an ad. So keep that in mind as well. You can go from very, very creative, but then sometimes if you're thinking about your end use and it's really just a simple asset you need, you might specifically just ask it for something basic, use words like minimal, use words like contrasting, between the main subject and the background, and that can be helpful as well. So you want to think about your end use, how you can potentially use it with different tools, and in the lessons ahead, the videos ahead, we're going to talk about those different AI tools in Canva, and we're going to sometimes come back to this, how we can use those tools in concert with these AI image generators. So you're not always going to be generating the final image you're going to use. Maybe sometimes you're going to be thinking about how I can then use that with some other tools for some other creative effects. And so the big takeaway from this video is just that the language you use when using these AI image generators in Canva is going to be super important. Now, to illustrate this point even farther, in the next video we are going to talk about visual style, and I'll walk you through an example showing you how you can start with the same basic prompt and get endless creative results and vastly different results just by varying a few words.